Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to another podcast for the Alberta Enterprise Group. I'm Danielle Smith, president of Alberta Enterprise Group. I mentioned my full name, Danielle Smith, because some of you, as I was traveling the province in my former political days, will know that Smith was not my original last name. When my great-great-grandfather, Philippus Kolodnicki, came over from the Galicia region of Ukraine, what is now Ukraine, I guess this region has changed hands about 5 times over the course of its history. So the fact that we have current conflict there is certainly something that the people of Ukraine are used to. But some bureaucrat renamed him Philip Smith. And so this is why my family bears the last name Smith. Now, he settled in Manitoba, and our family does not maintain any contacts with his family in Ukraine. It was funny. I have a Polish friend who was just in the process of translating some letters for me that were written back and forth between Philippus and his family members when the crisis in Ukraine and the invasion by Russia occurred. So we've been watching this very closely. And even though I do not maintain current ties to Ukraine, Alberta most certainly does. We have a very large number of Ukrainian families, large numbers, especially in many of the regions up and around Edmonton. And so many of them have built an incredible life and incredible businesses in this province. And guess what? They are stepping up in a huge way to help. My colleague, John Liston, was watching things as they unfolded over the last number of weeks and thought, you know what? I bet that there's some folks that I should be reaching out to see if there's something we can do. So he reached out to one very prominent member of our community, a name that is well known to us all, former premier. And I can't remember the riding you represented, but you're going to tell me. But former Premier of Alberta, the Honorable Ed Stelmach, joins me now, along with my colleague, John Liston, Vice President of Alberta Enterprise Group. Thank you both so much for being with me today.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us, Danielle.
You bet. So, John, I'm going to just start with you, and you're going to tell me how you ended up reaching out to Mr. Stelmach so that we can understand the extent to which he and the Polish community as well are working to bring aid and comfort to those who are displaced in Ukraine.
Thanks, Danielle. And listen, somebody once told me when bad people do bad things, good people have to step up. And so I was watching the news, and we've all been thinking and praying for all of our Ukrainian friends. But when I saw the news and I saw that Ed was doing some things, I thought, I don't know what I could do, but I'm going to make a call and see if we can help. So I tracked down the Honorable Mr. Stelmach, and we just started talking a little bit about what they're doing. And then I said, "What do you need?" And he said, "Well, right now we're looking for warehouse space." And so we were lucky enough as leaders of this group called Alberta Enterprise Group to have a wide variety of business leaders. And I went out to about 10 or 15 of them and just said, we need some warehouse space for a few weeks. Anybody help? And all of a sudden, everybody was jumping in with, yes, what do you need? When do you need it? Where do you need it? You need money. This is what businesses do. People all think that profit is a greed word. Well, profit allows businesses to be able to do exactly this, which is to step up in a time of need and do some extraordinary things. So we've been introducing some of our business leaders to Mr. Stelmach and his team, and they're just doing some extraordinary work. So enough about me. Let's hear from Ed and the project that is underway.
You got it. So, Mr. Stelmach, I know right now that you're, I think, on the board of Covenant Health. I don't know if you're doing the work you're doing in that capacity, but why don't you tell us a little bit about how it is that you've been organizing some of the relief effort?
Okay. Well, thank you, Danielle, and thank you for the opportunity. I do serve as chair of Covenant Health, and of course, volunteers, staff, physicians, and that have been contributed voluntarily. Donating towards supplies and monetary donations through the Canada-Ukraine Foundation and other organizations to aid the humanitarian need in Ukraine. I had received a call from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council, to join an ad hoc committee to do a number of things. And this is before the invasion. So create an awareness of the humanitarian need in Ukraine, especially in the Crimea area. Second, put in a plan in how we deal with Ukrainians that have relatives here. And at that time, we're asking, okay, how can we bring our relatives to Canada? And what are the rules and regulations? So we were working on that. And the day after the committee meeting, we thought, we had things in pretty good order. And then all of a sudden, the invasion. So all that changed immediately. And as you know, there's no need for an awareness campaign because everybody sees the savagery every day on TV. So the next, of course, is to concentrate on the humanitarian aid. So we're working with a number of agencies to provide and deliver the aid as deep as possible into the various cities that have been hit by constant shelling. One, of course, as I said before, is the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, the Edmonton Eparchy, the Ukrainian Catholic Church has a fund that they put together. Most of the other churches are well, they're all participating in some way, the Pentecostal Assembly. And when we were looking for volunteers, for help, a sponsor, then I connected with Thomas Lakazik, who is a member of the Polish community. He was one of the many people that came to Alberta following the downfall of martial law in Poland about 40 some years ago. And so we have the Canadian Polish Historical Society joining us, and they're the sponsor. He's been working with LOT Airlines. We have Shell that have come forward and say, is there something we could do, Shell Oil, in terms of maybe fuel offsetting some of the costs. We have excellent participation from the airport authority. They're waiving fees. We also have the specialized handlers that put the supplies together properly in the plane. Kuhn Nagel, who will be providing the service. And of course, when John blasted the email to all of your members, within minutes, literally within minutes, we had at least 6 calls, said, look, we're here to help. Just tell us what you need. So we'll be going back to some of the people because we're getting a truckload of supplies from St. Stephen's Parish in Calgary. And the clubs in Red Deer have indicated also that they'll be putting some goods and supplies together. So it's quite a monumental task, and we're also looking for someone with some logistical experience to ensure that things flow smoothly. And we do have that.
But Mr. Stelmach, I noticed that John's taken a note there. So as you're talking, he's going to be taking notes of all the members that we can call. Would you mind just giving me a bit of a history lesson? Because as I mentioned, my family history does not come from Alberta, but yours does. And I want to understand a little more about why we have such a large expatriate Ukrainian population and why they're sort of concentrated in the Edmonton area. Can you tell us a little bit about your family history and extend that out a bit?
Certainly. Well, the cradle of Ukrainian settlement is a community called Star, which is about 7 miles north from the town of Lamont. The first family was Pilipiu and Elenek in 1891. And then that first wave, my grandparents came here in 1898, also from Western Ukraine, a village called Evacuees, just northeast of Lviv. They came just like all of the other settlers with basic essentials, some tools, and incredible faith and this desire to build a better life. So till today, I'm and our family is forever grateful, and I'm sure all the other families are grateful that they made that decision, difficult decision to come to Canada. And since then, we've had a number of waves of people coming from Ukraine, from that part of Europe. In terms of our family, we lost a lot of the connection because, as you know, after 1917-18, when the communists took over, there was very little correspondence back and forth. And then the two world wars, the Great Famine, all of that affected Ukraine. So we lost contact. But I will say the night before the invasion, the soldier that was killed, 40-year-old staff sergeant, his name was Alexander Stelmach. So that really hit home. It kind of shook me. I thought, well, you know, is it a family member or not? The village, to my knowledge, has not been invaded. They're safe till now, and we'll see what will happen next. But you know, the more time we spend with Albertans that have relatives there, it's amazing how many people have crossed the border into Poland, some into Romania, and we're asking, okay, how can we prepare for your relatives to come to Alberta? And many of them say, you know, well, maybe this will be over in 2 weeks, and maybe I can go back home. And one Albertan called the other day. They're trying to get their aunt, and she says, well, you know, if I leave, who's going to take care of my cow? You know, so it's difficult, you know, and I can see the position they're in, and it makes for a bit more difficult planning for what we think will be a number of refugees, evacuees coming to Alberta. Today, apparently, the federal government is supposed to release their policy on what supports there'll be. We have many questions in terms of who's responsible for health programs. We here in Alberta, we can certainly integrate many into the communities quite easily because, you know, we have bilingual schools, the churches are here. There's a tremendous desire to help everyone that comes to Alberta. So I think, I know that's not going to be a problem, and we can definitely, a lot of the refugees can settle even in a small community surrounding Edmonton, and not necessarily Edmonton. We had, you know, Ukrainian populations in most of the major centers in Alberta.
Let me ask you about that because I'm going back as you're talking, thinking of all of the cabinet ministers of Ukrainian and Polish heritage you had in your time, and there's, I think, a large number of them. I think that Lloyd Snellgrove was from the Lloydminster Vermilion area, and I think there's a large Ukrainian community there. I'm actually going to Lloydminster this weekend. We've got Vegreville, Saskatchewan, of course, that was where you represented, and then Ray Danilek, Lac-La-Biche, St. Paul. But there's a large number of communities, as you say, that already have the connections, the infrastructure, the churches, the language ability as well to be able to integrate newcomers who are arriving as refugees. Do we have some sense of how many people might be coming to Alberta? When you talk about the federal policy being released, what is it you're preparing for?
We at the moment, we're looking maybe 5,000 to 7,000 people, but that is just a guess, Danielle, because we don't know how long the war will continue and how devastating it's going to be. We know it's going to be protracted if, you know, he's bombing the cities, etc. But there are many of the experts are saying that there'll be a long, drawn-out guerrilla war. And we're really seeing evidence of that. Some of these smaller communities have really surprised the Russian troops and done a lot of damage and you know, took out a lot of tanks, etc. It also depends what NATO is going to be doing. And for God's sake, you can't be watching this horror and not make decisions rather than just convening and talking about it and worrying about this threat of a nuclear war. Well, you better deal with the situation sooner than later, because what happens if all of Ukraine falls to Russia? What's next? Is it Poland? Is it Latvia? Moldavia? What other country? So the sooner they supply, they don't have to put troops on the ground, but they can certainly supply all of the anti-aircraft missiles, drones, all of the things that the Ukrainians use very well, very efficiently to push back on the Russians. And, they've used some incredible tactics to delay the invasion and create huge losses to the Russians. And, I have no experience in terms of these kind of tactics, but it seems like they've really surprised the Russians. And this was not the kind of blitzkrieg that Putin thought it's going to be. So the longer it takes, probably more people will be leaving. But here's the other thing, Danielle. Alexander Danileko, our Ukrainian consul here in Edmonton, said, we have to be careful. We don't know the outcome of what's going to happen in Ukraine. We don't want to lose all our people. We don't want to lose all our young people. Who's going to rebuild the country? And, he makes a good point. So we're kind of in this situation where we don't know what will happen over the next few weeks. Will the talks be successful? If there are, that'll be a different scenario. But
So
I still think a lot of people will come, though.
I wonder if you can help us. There's so much misinformation, so much propaganda, and it's really hard to understand how Ukrainians in those Russian-speaking regions truly feel, because we hear that Donetsk and Luhansk and Crimea actually have more affinity to Russia. They want to be independent republics. But I don't know if that is just Russian propaganda or not. Are you able to shed some light on that? I mean, is that where the solution lies, is having those regions be independent and non-aligned with either country? Or is there, I think the other stories I'm seeing are suggesting that Ukraine demilitarize completely and declare itself neutral. I guess there's a number of nations in the world who has. You think of Switzerland as an example. Do you have some insight that would help us kind of piece through what's real and what's not?
We have a number of people in the Canada-Ukraine Foundation that have a tremendous knowledge of the particular area that you're talking about, Donbas, that the Crimea region. And there definitely is a larger Russian-speaking population. And maybe, and I don't know where the talks are today, they may be looking at some, giving some parts, creating some sort of an agreement. And I don't know how they're going to do it. But Ukraine has to be careful that they have to have port capacity. You can't be landlocked in the end. And when you're mentioning to me, Danielle, one of the folks who wrote about the history is talking about the 1994, I think it was called the Budapest Memorandum, where the United States, United Kingdom, and Russia agreed that if Ukraine gives up their nuclear arsenal to Russia, then those three will protect the sovereignty and the independence of Ukraine. That happened in 1994. I'm wondering where some of those leaders are. Well, probably most of them are gone now. In terms of turning over the arsenal, you give yourself, to the other countries to protect, and nobody's really stepping in to help at this particular time. So, incredible history. In fact, some of the historians can go on for hours in terms of the shifts in Ukraine, the fight for independence, and let's be very clear. Even all of the elections have been influenced by the Russians. That's why we had monitors over the many elections in terms of the graph, the food that was delivered to apartments, vote for this person, supported by, pro-Russian government. So, I can see why those Babas and Yudas are not giving up. They went through oppression for so many times. They finally rebuilt the country. They put the churches back in place. They took all these icons and all these pictures out of basements, hung them back in the churches. They rebuilt them. All of the arts, culture came back, and now it's being taken away. And that's why they're so steadfast in their commitment to the country, and they're going to sacrifice their life. And we can see that happening with the number of people they're conscripting.
I remember when I was in the legislature, one of the annual ceremonies was commemorating the Holodomor. I don't know if it was Ken Kowalski who brought that in or Jean Zwazdewski who brought that in. But again, it just, I think, goes to the Ukrainian heritage of so many of our elected members. And so when I understood that we're seeing a spike in wheat prices, one of the regions that it looks like Russia is after is the food producing region. It makes me uneasy to think about what kind of impact that might have on food security. Are you able to give us some your thoughts on that too?
Sure. But very quickly on the Holodomor, that was a rare opportunity in the House, Alberta's Legislative Assembly, that all parties passed the bill. I believe it was in the same day, all three readings, to support Holodomor and make sure we put it in place that we recognize the Great Famine. And then Speaker Kowalski ensured that we celebrated that event every year. Coming back to world food supply, it's a serious matter. Ukraine produces 25% of sunflower, for instance, fertilizer. They're a great wheat exporter. I believe since independence, their productivity, just being more efficient in productivity. Now they're a major wheat supplier, exporter to different countries around the world. Some of the issues, like in sunflower, for instance. So it's an oil. It's already affecting the oil market. And given the fact that the Russians have mined a lot of the good agricultural land, and also are trying to seize all the ports, very little of a product will leave Ukraine. And I'm kind of envisioning, how the heck are you going to be out in the field planting your crop if you've got missiles and bombs flying over your head? So and both Russia and Ukraine will limit their exports because they have to feed themselves. So it's going to have a huge effect on prices of wheat, some of the edible oils, and fertilizer for sure. So we're already affected in Alberta and Canada. Fertilizer is more than doubled. Some of the issues are related to supply chains, but most of the fact that a lot of those products, Ukraine played a very important role in the world market. So it's going to increase our food prices. We see that happening, but we haven't seen the end of it yet, because with the destruction, the rail, the bridges, how do you get back to somewhat normal? It's going to take years.
I did an interview on the News Forum with Tim Pickering, who's a financial analyst, and he was of the view that seizing that agricultural land area was part of the reason for the invasion. What reason does Russia have to take over that production of food?
I don't think there's anybody that can get into Putin's mind. It's difficult to comprehend how a person can have such incredible control over his citizens, the fear, the oppression, and some say he's the richest man in the world. So why do this? After this, where do you go? You're marked now forever. And so you won't enjoy your riches unless you stay within the confines of Russia. Is it because of the land, the resources? Could be. I mean, Russia is incredible output now, and we're helping. Where does President Biden go to buy oil? It goes to Russia, not to Canada. And it's just the hypocrisy of this. And that's why Canadians especially Albertans, are so upset at the current situation. But there's so many other resources in Ukraine that would definitely boost Russia's total economic output. And that could be the reason. But this thing about, well, you know, if you don't sign with NATO, if you sign with NATO, then we're worried about you, some oppression in Russia. That you know, had no substance. It was just an excuse. And we watched all of the personnel, the army personnel, the troops at the border for weeks. And we could have been applying sanctions then, not after. You got to be proactive. And remember, Putin is a former KGB, the highest level of KGB. If you read one of his, there's a lady, and I don't know where she is now because he was trying to, if I know where she lives, he wrote a autobiography of Putin. And he was in Berlin when the wall was coming down, and he made a personal note. It says, a lesson, don't give the power to the people. And he watched that wall coming down. So this is the mindset. And probably that high up in the KGB is probably psychologically changed. And because there can't be any remorse, there's no conscience, there's no heart. You know, I don't know how cold a person can be to do this. So I don't know. You know, Danielle, you can see all of the opinion writers around the world have all their opinions. But does anybody really know? I don't think so.
Do you know what I've been surprised by is just how quickly we're seeing public sentiment change on another issue that you had to fight when you were premier, which is access to markets. And it's remarkable to me. I think a poll just is being circulated now with people asking their appetite to revisit Keystone XL to get that built. And I think it's something like 78%. We're having discussions about different nations banning the import of oil, natural gas, and oil products. Really difficult to do since Russia provides, I think, something like a combined 11 million barrels of oil per day equivalent. And so where do you see Canada fitting into all of this? We're in the process of really fighting off this battle of extreme green environmentalists who want to keep fossil fuels in the ground. We saw this in Quebec with them banning the exploration of oil and gas. If you were premier, what would you do to help now make the case about why it is we've got to amp this up? We've got to help our friends in Europe, and we've got to create energy security.
There were two things that were very frustrating in my time. One was the fact that we could not, across Canada, get some interprovincial trade agreements, which was so frustrating. Billions of dollars in the economy that we're losing because we couldn't get along. And so that's why we signed the agreement between BC, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, which is a step forward. And then Manitoba came along. But the oil pipeline, it's so difficult to explain to the average Albertan the hypocrisy. So the day after you sever, you say, okay, no Keystone. This is for the betterment of the climate. And then quietly, secretly, you're buying all the oil from Russia. You're moving all this oil by tanker, belching all the black smoke from bunker fuel on both sides of the continent, okay? Both oceans, getting to the refineries. And people are wondering, well, where's the sense? Germany, relying on one source, okay? And here we have the opportunity to export LNG, and we get the terrorists, and believe it me, all that damage that was done wasn't done just with an axe. This is well-planned, eco-terrorists, and this is happening before our own eyes. And we're allowing, because of the environmentalists, these radical environmentalists, push other countries to secure their energy from countries that have no human rights, oppress their people, no women's rights, just, you know, and the average Albertan is wondering, well, where's the leadership? Like, why are we doing this? And we have the resource. Yes, we have to be careful. In a way, we're all environmentalists, and Alberta has come a long way in reducing its emissions, both oil and gas and agriculture. We're leading the way because of investing in technology, and that's the answer. But just
and we should just note as well that you made a decision on a major investment in carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which we now have 5 projects in Canada. And I just saw Jonathan Wilkinson and Stephen Guilbeault, the environment minister, saying that that's going to be the solution. And because we have so many startups in Canada, that we can be a leader on that. So congratulations to you for having the foresight of being able to see the investment that was needed there. Well,
you know, at that time, it wasn't easy. But, you know, again, and I'm out of politics, but
well, you had a harsh critic at the time saying, why are we investing all this money in one project? I remember who she was. But it turns out making that major investment in one project actually created quite a breakthrough.
But the thing is, well, there are a number of things that happened then. But the thing is, most importantly, if carbon is the issue, you deal with it now. So whether it's the best idea or not for the future, but at least you can remove it from the environment. Now we have a solution. And at that time, look at all the countries that participated in the research at the University of Alberta. You know, Korea was here, Japan was here, Saudi Arabia was here. Many of the European countries were very interested. We signed an agreement in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. You know, everybody was interested in it. And look, it's going to work. Can we do more? Yes, we can. But how did we get there? Because whatever we taxed the major emitters, the $25, went directly in research. And guess what? It didn't go into government coffers. It went to research. Third party making the decision. Where's the best investment in research? And now we're benefiting from it. So, you know,
you have such a good story to tell.
My frustration.
I can tell, but you know what? It's nice that post-politics, you're able to see some of the benefit of the actions that you're taking. And now also post-politics, you're able to do so much work to assist the communities that are facing this hardship in their families. Let me ask you just a couple more things. I'm sure John will want to jump into, but I want to just make sure we don't leave our conversation before knowing, getting our Albertans to prepare for what it is we may have to deal with, what it is we need to be prepared for. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to do on energy and natural gas and making the case that we can be the secure supplier that's also environmentally sustainable and affordable. We obviously are going to have to do more work, it looks like, in the agriculture sector to make sure some of those food shortage issues are addressed. And it sounds like as well, if we're going to be welcoming a number of refugees here, we've got to be prepared for that as well. What else can you tell us about what we might be needing to plan for if this ends up extending over months or, heaven forbid, years?
With respect to energy and green energy, I just hope that we find a balance. We're going to require fossil fuels for the next number of decades. We can, we'll move towards greener technologies. There's no doubt about that. But let's not rush it, because what's going to happen is we might get tied like other countries where the cost of energy has inflated dramatically, and as a result puts additional pressure on our productivity, our economic productivity, but especially on the average citizen. And we're already seeing that in Canada and really in the North American continent. Europe, they always had higher energy prices, but we're going to see those increase dramatically. So that's a worry for the future. Let's make good decisions with the desire to reduce emissions, but let's be careful that we don't make decisions that's going to reduce the supply of energy, both electrical, fossil fuel, and create an issue for us. The other, with respect to Ukraine, I don't see this situation or the effects of the situation, current situation, resolving itself over a short period of time. It's going to take years to rebuild. And in the matter of carbon, can you imagine the amount of concrete that has to be produced to rebuild those buildings and schools and hospitals and bridges? I wonder who's calculating that today. You know, I'm just putting it on the table for consideration. That's incredible destruction, and we're going to cut off Keystone Pipeline, you know, for environmental reasons. So it's difficult to put your head down on a pillow every night and think about these decisions that have been made. The other matter is humanitarian aid for Ukraine and aid for the Polish government to feed all the people and house them, accommodate them over the next period of time is going to be incredible. There's so many members of the population that are at risk, worried about seniors who, you know, where are their pensions going to come from? Some of those babas, this is the third time they got a hole in the roof of their house because of the war. And other instances in previously when they were under Russian control, the disabled, the young women that are at risk of human trafficking, the young mothers, children, like all your supports have disappeared. That's going to take an incredible time to rebuild the schools, the hospitals. So this effort will continue for many years. And who knows? God knows what else is going to happen during that period of time in terms of catastrophic events. You know, weather related, not weather. You know, there's no crystal ball to give you that information. The other is once people come to Canada, we're caught up in the heat of the emotion because we see this every day. But if things do settle down, they reach peace, that emotion may wane, and people may, it might not be top of mind to continue to support in whatever way possible, donation of goods or monetary contributions to aid the people that got caught in this event.
Let me let John come in and ask a few more questions on that, sure, because we want to know. We've got obviously a long-term plan for how it is we're going to have to deal with this world disruption and Canada's place in it. But I think we all want to know is there anything we can do today to help? So John, why don't I throw it over to you, and you can we've already talked about the need for warehouse space. Maybe you can explain a little bit about why that is. And then also just tell us a few of the other things that you might need. John, did you want to take it up from here?
Thanks, Danielle. The call that I made to Mr. Stelmach was, you know, what do you need? And so the first thing we talked about was some warehouse space, because we need to collect. So there's going to be a plane load of, again, the Polish airlines. The Polish people have been incredible. And thanks to Thomas Lukaszek in that process. They're going to bring a plane load of people here, and then we're going to turn around and fill the plane and send it back. And we want to fill it with supplies. So I think, Ed, if I got the number right, it's 80 or 85 pallets of goods that we can get into this plane. And so we need to collect a bunch of things, and we need to then, you know, package them and prepare them for how they fit into a plane properly. And so the first step was to find some warehouse space. And again, many of our members stepped up. I think right now there's one location, but we might have multiple locations if we are lucky enough to fill up the first one, Ed. And then what do we need? So, you know, there's pasta is a big thing. A lot of the dry goods. So pasta, dry soup mixes, over-the-counter medications like Tylenol, Advil, you know, aspirin, women's hygiene products. Diapers. This is an extraordinary number, but there's been 4,000 babies born in the Ukraine since the start of the war. And so the volume of diapers that are required are significant. So one of our members, Mike Loveson, who runs Friesen Brothers, he's got a long relationship with Mr. Stelmach and up in the Peace River area where they started, and so he's going to his suppliers. But we have a supply chain issue in Canada, yes, let alone trying to help the Ukraine. And so we have a problem in that the supply chain is really probably at 50 or 60% capability right now, between manufacturing and transportation. And there we are trying to get extra so that we can send it to the Ukraine. So we're getting tested. And so anyway, those are some of the things that we need. We need volunteers because we're going to have a whole bunch of people in the these logistics centers to be able to package things and get it to Poland. And then we've got to prepare for the lives of these people that are going to come here. So a lot of churches are preparing for kind of a refugee program. And so those are some of the things that are being worked on right now. Ed, am I missing anything?
No, many of the municipalities are contributing firefighting equipment, hoses, helmets. Many are just individual donors are coming with a couple of boxes of diapers. They're showing up in the warehouse, etc. But I just got to relate to you, John, a story. One of your members called yesterday. He went to Costco and he wanted to buy Advil. So he says, why am I going to buy just a small cart? So he bought the whole case, went to the till and said, sorry, sir, we can't sell you that quantity. The most we can sell you is 3 of the containers, the bottles. So he told them what it was for, and they said, no, this is the policy. So a manager had come and said, no, we can't. So he asked people in the lineup, says, well, look, I'll give you the money, to buy 3 containers, and we'll put together the box. So that's just an example. Here's a challenge. If you want to buy a large quantity of over-the-counter drugs, you might have to take the whole neighborhood to.
He sounds like he was successful, at least, in getting the whole pallet or the whole box, was he?
Yeah, he was working pretty hard, and but that's just an example of some of the challenges we have. But we're just getting more and more. But the more we message out to the public, the more donations are coming, and look, families are strained economically here as well. It's not that easy, but boy, I'll tell you, and I got to put a word in also for a classmate of mine, Dennis Scrabo. Dennis we used to sell Fuller brush when we were in high school. I had my driver's license a few months before Dennis, and he had this 54 Ford station wagon. And we'd go to Edmonton, we'd fill it up full of Fuller brush products and come out to Andrew. And of course, we both spoke Ukrainian, and he'd have the franchise area north of Andrew. I was south, and we'd be selling brooms and brushes and fly spray and God knows what. Well, over the years, he's put a group together, and he's been doing humanitarian aid to many countries in South America, Mexico, and he's doing this yeoman work with his group in Ukraine. And so he's with the Pentecostal Assembly churches, and they're also helping in this endeavor. So, and he's got the experience. They've got people on the ground also, because you got to know your way around to get to the many communities in Ukraine safely, whether it's possible or not. But so it's just an example of the number of people that are pulling together.
It's remarkable. It makes it a little more difficult to figure out the best point of entry for someone who wants to help. So you've mentioned Pentecostal churches, you've mentioned the Polish community. You've mentioned St. Stephen's, I think, as well.
Yeah.
What is the best way if somebody wants to make a donation or a physical contribution? Is there sort of a single point of entry we can direct them to?
So monetary donations, there's the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, like I had mentioned before. You can go online, and on the website, there's this big red band. Click on it. You can donate, or it'll give you also a list of other items that you can, participate in, or some ideas. There is also the Edmonton Evacuees. The Edmonton Evacuees, the Ukrainian Catholic Church, the bishop has a anonymous donor that will match up to the first $500,000 of donations. And just Google Edmonton Evacuees, and when you make a donation, make sure you stipulate it's humanitarian aid to Ukraine. The Polish hall will be opened, I believe it's March 21st to the 23rd from 2 to 7 p.m. People can deliver goods there, different supplies. And there, of course, the other groups that are offering support, the traditional ones like Red Cross, etc. But those are the ones that we're working with now. And the Edmonton Catholic Schools, like I said before, delivered teachers and students, put together also different supplies, boxes and boxes of protein bars, because some of the people have been walking for days with just a backpack and no food, and then they come to the border and they got to wait in line for bread. So they're handing out some of the protein bars and chocolate bars, etc. The one thing is, please don't donate for the plane anything liquid. So these little fruit cups, we can't send them because they'll be in the hull of the cargo bay, and they may explode. We even had some IV bags delivered, and we can't send them. And we also know that at the other border in Poland, the Ukrainian army will go through most of the boxes to ensure there are no incendiary devices, any explosive devices. And there's a lot of hands at play, but the goods will be delivered then to different communities with the aid of the Ukrainian army.
What as you say, what an immense logistical challenge. John, do you have anything else? We've kept Mr. Stelmach a little bit longer than I think he'd expected. So do you have anything else that you want to post him before we go?
No, I just want to thank him. It's incredible the leadership that he's provided at the official level, but this is the leadership that really matters, is when you get on the street and you just get people helping each other. And it's what makes Alberta, Alberta. And very proud to be an Albertan at this time when we do this sort of stuff. So thanks, Mr. Stelmach.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. This is crossing all political lines, religious. Everybody's pulling together. I even forgot to mention there's the Turkish Muslim Society in Calgary that's working with St. Stephen's. They want to donate products, and that truck should be arriving beginning of next week. So I thank you very much. This goes a long way in helping the cause, and what else can you say? It's the minimum we can do, and we'll just keep hoping and praying that there'll be a peaceful resolution.
Completely. What a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Mr. Stelmach. I sure appreciate your time today.
Thank you. God bless.
Yeah, you bet. And that was the Honorable Ed Stelmach, former Premier of Alberta. You'll probably have recognized him right from the beginning. And that is amazing, John, isn't it? That he's been able to you always wonder what politicians do. post-politics. Doesn't sound like he's slowing down. In fact, this is he's sort of in the perfect place right now to be coordinating all of this effort, not only because of his political connections, but also deep connections personally in the community and all the business connections he's developed over the years. It's amazing how the business community is stepping up.
If I can put a little plug in for the Irish, given that it's St. Patrick's Day today and I'm wearing my green. In 1847, the Irish were struggling with the potato famine, and a First Nations group called the Choctaw First Nations out of the U.S. sent them money. And 170 years later, when the pandemic hit in the last couple of years, the Irish sent supplies back to the Choctaw to say thank you 170 years later. And there's just something about the contribution when there's challenge, a crisis, a famine of any sort. And here we are with one, and we can help. Let's do it. Let's figure out a way to help.
Well, and congratulations to you for reaching out to Mr. Stelmach so that we knew what was going on in the community, and hopefully we'll be able to continue providing that support. Even more, hopefully, it won't last as long as we all fear. But thanks again for your initiative on this, John. Sure appreciate it.
Thanks, Danielle.
You got it. And John Liston is Vice President of Alberta Enterprise Group. So we'll probably do a posting out if you're on our email list that lists the different ways in which you can provide support. It sounds like one of the key events, though, happening is the Polish Hall, March 21st to 22nd in Edmonton, where they'll be receiving contributions from 2 to 7 o'clock p.m. And as Mr. Stelmach mentioned, no liquids. And John listed off a number of different items: female hygiene products, diapers, basic medication for pain relief, protein bars, so things that are non-perishable, pasta, things that can make it over there. And then as well, it sounds like the Muslim community in Calgary is working through St. Stephen's to be able to assist down south. So we'll make some of those resources available to you. I think because there's so many personal and family connections with Ukraine, everybody is hoping for a resolution and hoping that we can provide the support in the meantime. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Danielle Smith, President of Alberta Enterprise Group. We'll see you again.